Has anyone ever had someone look at your car and demand you hand over the keys because they claim it's theirs? Because right now I'm standing here watching a woman in neon clothing screaming at two police officers that my bright red Tesla actually belongs to her. And here's the crazy part. She completely believes what she's saying. Who do you think is about to get arrested when both people are claiming ownership of the same car? Drop your predictions in the comments and let me know where you're watching from. I'm curious if anyone's ever met an HOA Karen this unhinged. Willowbrook Estates. Sounds fancy, right? Well, that's what they want you to think anyway. In reality, it's just another cookie-cutter suburban neighborhood with beige houses and lawns trimmed to mathematical precision. I had just moved here after my architecture business really took off, and honestly, I was pretty proud of what I'd accomplished. That bright red Tesla Model S 2024 sitting in my driveway was my reward for years of grinding away at my craft. But I never imagined that car would make me the target of what I can only describe as suburban warfare. Paulette Sue Whitmore. That name is burned into my brain forever. She was the self-proclaimed queen bee of Willowbrook, ruling over the neighborhood as HOA president with an iron fist wrapped in fake designer knockoffs. The first time I met her, I was detailing my Tesla in the garage when she approached like a walking fashion disaster. Picture this: a hot pink tropical print blouse, bright enough to cause retinal damage, fake leopard print leggings that looked like they came from a gas station vending machine, and shocking pink plastic high heels that click-clacked on the pavement like a broken metronome. Her bleach blonde hair was teased up into what could only be described as a helmet, and her acrylic nails were so long and neon green they looked like dragon claws. "I'm Paulette Whitmore, HOA president," she announced like she was proclaiming herself empress of the known universe. "And this car," she eyed my Tesla like a predator sizing up prey, "seems pretty expensive for someone who just moved in." The way she said expensive made it sound like a dirty word. I politely explained that business had been good and I'd rewarded myself with the Tesla. But the expression on Paulette's face told a different story. This wasn't congratulations I was seeing. This was pure, undiluted envy mixed with something darker, a sense of entitlement I'd never encountered before. Throughout that 5-minute conversation, Paulette kept referencing HOA rules like some kind of religious mantra. "We have very specific guidelines about vehicles in this community," she said, while circling my Tesla like a shark. "Some cars just don't fit the aesthetic we're going for." I tried to stay polite, explaining that I'd thoroughly researched the community guidelines before buying my house, and that my Tesla was completely compliant, but Paulette just smiled. One of those smiles that doesn't reach the eyes and makes your skin crawl. Less than 2 weeks after that encounter, I knew I'd made an enemy. There were the sideways glances when I'd check my mail, the way she'd slow down deliberately when driving past my house, and especially the way she'd stare at my Tesla like someone completely obsessed. It was the kind of attention that makes you feel like bugs are crawling up your spine. I kept telling myself I was being paranoid. After all, this was just a middle-aged woman with too much time and too little purpose in life. What harm could she possibly cause? I thought the worst-case scenario would be Paulette complaining about my music being too loud or griping about how I edged my lawn. I was wrong. Very wrong. Because just 3 days later, I found a note stuck under my Tesla's windshield wiper, with shaky handwriting that read, "Park here again and face the consequences." And that was just the beginning of what would become the most insane neighbor dispute of my life. That morning, I woke up in a pretty good mood until I looked out my window and saw a piece of paper fluttering under my Tesla's windshield wiper. At first, I thought it might be some kind of advertisement or neighborhood newsletter, but when I read the contents, my blood pressure spiked instantly. The note was written in purple ink with handwriting so shaky it looked like the person was in a rage. "Park here again and face the consequences. This car doesn't belong here and neither do you." Okay, this was getting serious. I immediately walked over to my next-door neighbor Thornton Blackwood's house. Thornton was a distinguished gentleman in his early 40s with silver hair and the demeanor of someone who'd seen enough legal drama to not be surprised by anything. When I showed him the note, he sighed deeply and adjusted his reading glasses. "Ah, you've gotten the Paulette treatment," he said with the weariness of experience. "Fishy's pushed out 3 previous homeowner families with these exact same tactics. The Johnsons sold after 6 months, the Garcias lasted 2 years but eventually gave up." Thornton explained Paulette's standard operating procedure. Start with intimidation, escalate to false HOA violations, then moved to harassment involving authorities if the first two phases didn't work. She has a mental catalog of every single rule violation in this community, real or imagined, he informed me. But here's the thing. Most of the time, she makes up rules that don't actually exist in the bylaws. He suggested I document everything and familiarize myself with the real HOA regulations, rather than Paulette's twisted version of them. 2 days after the warning note, I found another surprise in my mailbox, an official-looking letter with HOA letterhead declaring my Tesla in violation of Section 4.7 of Neighborhood Vehicular Aesthetic Standards. The letter demanded I relocate my vehicle to the garage immediately to maintain community property values. I spent the entire evening reading through the actual HOA bylaws, all 37 pages of them, and couldn't find Section 4.7 anywhere. The entire vehicular section only had 4 subsections, and none of them mentioned anything about car colors or brands. I crafted a polite but firm response and sent it via certified mail. In my letter, I quoted the exact bylaws regarding vehicle regulations and pointed out that Section 4.7 didn't exist in the official documents. I included photocopies of the relevant pages with the specific sections highlighted. My response was professional, factual, and completely bulletproof. Or at least I thought it was. Paulette's reaction was swift and furious. She showed up at my door just 2 hours after the mail carrier delivered my letter. Today's outfit was particularly offensive to the retinas: a neon yellow blouse with rhinestone palm trees, zebra print capri pants, and bright orange Crocs with jingling charms. Her hair was teased even higher than usual, and her makeup was applied with the heavy hand of someone who'd learned their technique from teenage tutorial. "How dare you question my authority?" she shrieked right there on my front porch. "I have been HOA president for 6 years, and I know these rules better than anyone." I maintained a calm tone and explained that I'd simply compared her citation with the actual bylaws and found a discrepancy. "Are you calling me a liar?" she demanded, her voice reaching a pitch that could shatter glass. Neighbors began peeking out of their windows, clearly familiar with Paulette's public meltdowns. From that point on, things escalated quickly. Paulette started monitoring my daily routine with the dedication of a private investigator. She would coincidentally be outside watering her plants every morning when I left for work, and every evening when I came home. My Tesla suddenly developed mysterious issues. Nothing major, just annoying things that made me question my sanity. A shopping cart somehow rolled into my passenger door in the grocery store parking lot, and witnesses said they saw someone push it. Bird droppings appeared with suspicious frequency despite the fact that I parked under clear sky. Little scratches manifested overnight on my paint job, like some kind of automotive stigmata. But the real kicker was when I discovered she'd been asking neighbors about suspicious activity from my house. According to Thornton, she'd mentioned possible drug dealing because how else would someone afford a Tesla on an architect's salary? Noise violations, despite the fact that I barely played music above whisper level, and concerns about property values decreasing due to the wrong kind of residents moving in. I realized the situation had escalated far beyond a simple neighbor disagreement. Paulette was systematically trying to build a case against me based on lies and fabrications. I thought responding with facts would end the drama. Instead, it just made her more determined to prove she was right, and I had the sinking feeling that the worst was yet to come, especially when I woke up the next morning to find my Tesla's passenger mirror completely snapped off with clear scratch marks running along the entire side of my car. Tuesday morning of that week, I woke up to a sight that made my stomach drop like a stone. My Tesla's passenger side mirror was hanging by its electrical wire, clearly snapped off with considerable force. Deep scratch marks ran along the entire passenger side, like someone had taken a key and dragged it deliberately across the paint. The damage was estimated at least $3,000 to repair properly. This was no longer harassment. This was criminal vandalism, plain and simple. And I immediately called the police to file a report. Officer Rodriguez arrived within 20 minutes, documented the damage thoroughly with photos, and took my statement about the escalating situation with Paulette. While he was processing the paperwork, Paulette appeared like a bad penny that keeps turning up. Today, she was sporting a bright purple tracksuit with a matching visor, gold lame sneakers, and a purse shaped like a pineapple. "Oh my goodness," she exclaimed with fake concern oozing from every word. "What a terrible thing happened to your beautiful car." The way she emphasized beautiful made it clear she didn't mean it as a compliment. Such a shame about vandalism in our neighborhood, she continued, shaking her head dramatically. Maybe you should consider parking somewhere safer. I always tell residents to be more careful about protecting their investments. The pause before investments was pointed and loaded with implication. Officer Rodriguez glanced at her with an expression that suggested he'd encountered Paulette's brand of concern trolling before. After he left, I knew I needed to take more serious precautions. That afternoon, I immediately drove to the nearest electronics store and purchased a comprehensive security system. Thornton helped me install discrete cameras covering the entire front of my property, including the driveway where my Tesla was parked. "Trust me," he said while adjusting the final camera angle. "You're going to need evidence when she strikes again. And she will strike again. They always do." 2 days later, my camera system proved its worth beyond my wildest expectations. I was reviewing footage from the previous afternoon and discovered something extraordinary. Crystal clear video of Paulette approaching my Tesla during the middle of the day when the neighborhood was deserted, looking around nervously, then deliberately keying the passenger side with what appeared to be a large nail file. The video quality was excellent, good enough to see the rhinestone details on her tracksuit and the expression of vindictive satisfaction on her face when she examined her handiwork. I had my smoking gun. The evidence couldn't have been more clear if she'd left a signed confession, but Thornton advised patience when I showed him the footage. "Let's build a stronger case," he suggested with the wisdom of someone who'd practiced law for decades. "Document everything systematically. If she escalates further, we'll have a comprehensive record of the harassment pattern that no court could ignore." The next phase of her campaign was more sophisticated and systematic. She'd apparently researched permitting requirements for various home improvements and began filing complaints with the city about supposed violations at my property. These complaints ranged from the absolutely ridiculous to the completely fabricated. Each complaint triggered an inspection visit from city officials, each requiring me to take time off work to be present during their examination. The city inspectors were clearly frustrated by these wild goose chases they were being sent on. Meanwhile, the Tesla vandalism incidents increased in both frequency and boldness. My tire pressure would mysteriously decrease overnight. My windshield wipers would be repositioned. Small stones would appear strategically placed under my tire treads, nothing severe enough to cause real damage, but annoying enough to make it clear that someone was actively targeting my vehicle with methodical precision, and my cameras caught everything. The most disturbing incident occurred during a weekend when I was away visiting family. Upon my return, I discovered that someone had attempted to pick the lock on my garage door. The scratch marks around the lock mechanism were obvious, and my security footage showed Paulette spending nearly 20 minutes with various tools trying to gain entry. When her attempt failed, she walked around my entire property, peering into windows and trying door handles. She even climbed onto my outdoor furniture to reach second-floor windows. This crossed the line from harassment into attempted breaking and entering territory. I compiled my entire video evidence collection and prepared to file formal police complaints with the detective division. Thornton reviewed all the footage and agreed completely. This constitutes stalking and attempted burglary at minimum. It's definitely time to take serious legal action. But before our meeting with the police, Paulette made a move that neither of us had anticipated. On Sunday afternoon, while I was washing my Tesla in the driveway, she marched over with unusual confidence that immediately put me on guard. Today's ensemble was particularly jarring: a hot pink blazer over a leopard print dress, cowboy boots covered in glitter, and oversized sunglasses despite the overcast sky. But something about her expression behind those glasses was different. Less manic energy, more calculated menace. "Garrett," she said in a tone that was sickeningly sweet, "I think we need to have a serious conversation about your situation here. Certain people in the community have expressed concerns, and I'd hate for things to escalate unnecessarily." The way she emphasized escalate made it clear she was preparing the next level of her attack. "Perhaps we could come to some kind of arrangement that would benefit everyone involved." I politely declined whatever arrangement she was contemplating and stated my intention to continue living peacefully in the home I had legally purchased. Her expression changed instantly. The sweet facade dropped like a mask, replaced by cold, hard anger that was genuinely unsettling. "You have no idea what you're dealing with," she hissed through gritted teeth. "This community has ways of handling people who don't belong here. And trust me, your expensive car won't protect you from what's coming next." That threat was the final straw for me. I realized that Paulette wasn't going to be deterred by logic, evidence, or even law enforcement warnings. She had become completely unhinged, and the situation required decisive action before it spiraled completely out of control. I completed my compilation of evidence and scheduled a meeting with Detective Morrison for the very next morning. But Paulette had one more surprise waiting for me. Because that very evening I received a phone call from dispatch informing me that police officers were responding to a disturbance call at my address, and according to the caller, I had threatened violence and was storing stolen property on my premises. Monday evening at exactly 7 o'clock, my doorbell rang with an urgency that immediately set off every alarm bell in my head. Peering through the window, I saw two police officers standing on my porch, Deputy Sheriff Wolfgang Torres and his partner, Officer Bennett. Both looked official and serious in that way that makes innocent people nervous. When I answered the door, Deputy Torres spoke in a measured, professional tone. "Sir, we've received a report about a stolen vehicle on these premises. Mind if we have a conversation with you about that?" I invited the officers inside, my heart pounding not from any guilty conscience, but rather from anticipation of whatever lies Paulette had concocted this time. Deputy Torres was a tall man with a graying mustache and eyes that suggested he'd seen every possible kind of human nonsense during his career in law enforcement. He explained that they'd received a call from a concerned neighbor, reporting suspicious activity involving what the caller believed was a stolen vehicle. According to the complaint, Officer Bennett added, the resident witnessed someone operating a vehicle they believe was stolen from another location. The complainant insists they have proof of ownership. Before I could even begin to respond, a commotion outside indicated Paulette's dramatic arrival. She burst through my front door like a natural disaster in human form, and today's outfit defied all rational description. Picture a sequined pink sweater over an orange floral skirt, purple tights, green cowboy boots with rhinestones, and a hat shaped like a pineapple complete with bobbing plastic leaves on top. Her jewelry created a symphony of noise with every movement. Multiple charm bracelets, chandelier earrings, and necklaces of various lengths, creating an absolute cacophony. "Officers, thank goodness you've arrived," she exclaimed, pointing at me dramatically like I was public enemy number one. "This man has stolen my ex-husband's Tesla and refuses to return it to its rightful owner." Her voice reached a crescendo that could have woken the dead 3 neighborhoods over. "I have been terrorized by this individual for weeks now. He threatens me personally, vandalizes my property, and now he's using a vehicle that rightfully belongs to my family." Deputy Torres and Officer Bennett exchanged a glance that spoke volumes about their previous experiences with Paulette's theatrical performances. "Ma'am?" Deputy Torres said with the infinite patience of someone trained in dealing with difficult civilians. "We'll need to verify any ownership claims properly. Sir," he turned to me, "do you happen to have documentation for this vehicle?" Fortunately, I'd organized all my paperwork meticulously after Thornton's advice about documenting everything in this escalating situation. I produced a complete folder containing the original bill of sale, DMV registration documents, insurance certificates, financing papers from my bank, and even the purchase receipt from the Tesla dealership. Every single document clearly showed that the Tesla Model S had been purchased legally 5 months ago and was registered solely under my name. "Additionally," I said, pulling out my phone, "I have comprehensive security camera footage showing this woman vandalizing my vehicle within the past 2 weeks. Paulette's performance reached absolutely theatrical heights at this revelation. "Those documents are forged," she shrieked, mascara beginning to run from what appeared to be glycerin-induced crocodile tears. "My ex-husband bought that car as an anniversary gift for our marriage. When he left me, he illegally transferred the title without my knowledge. This man is an accomplice in elaborate fraud." She pulled crumpled papers from her knockoff designer purse, waving them frantically like some kind of legal battle flag. Officer Bennett examined Paulette's documents with an increasingly skeptical expression. The papers appeared to be photocopies of photocopies, some with text partially obscured by poor reproduction, others with obvious whiteout corrections. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "these documents have serious issues with authenticity. The serial numbers don't match up, the dates are inconsistent, and the signatures appear to be written by different people entirely." Thornton arrived at exactly the right moment, apparently alerted by the commotion that was clearly visible from his house next door. He brought additional documentation, neighborhood security camera footage from multiple houses showing my Tesla consistently parked in my driveway over the past several months, and official HOA records showing no ownership disputes filed through proper channels. Deputy Torres made a radio call to verify information with the DMV database in real time. The confirmation came through like the voice of sanity cutting through chaos. The Tesla Model S was registered exclusively to my name with no ownership disputes, liens, or claims on file anywhere in the system. The financing was verified through a legitimate bank loan, and there was absolutely no connection whatsoever to Paulette or any ex-husband named Charles. While we waited for the verification, Paulette launched into increasingly desperate accusations. "They're all conspiring against me," she wailed like some kind of suburban banshee. "The entire neighborhood is jealous because property values are decreasing due to the wrong kind of people moving in. This is discrimination against divorced women." She actually attempted to grab the Tesla keys from my pocket at one point, leading Officer Bennett to intervene, physically but gently. Faced with this overwhelming mountain of evidence completely contradicting her story, Paulette made a decision that would ultimately lead to her downfall. Instead of retreating gracefully, she doubled down with the desperation of a gambler who'd bet everything on a losing hand. "Fine!" she screamed loud enough to alert the entire neighborhood. "If you won't arrest him for theft, then I demand you arrest him for threatening me, and for stolen property, and for discrimination." Deputy Torres sighed deeply with the weariness of someone who dealt with too many situations exactly like this one. "Ma'am, at this point we need to advise you that filing false police reports is illegal in this state. Harassment is also illegal. Based on all the evidence that's been presented here tonight, it appears you've been systematically targeting this resident without any legal justification whatsoever." He turned to me with a professional expression. "Sir, would you like to press charges for harassment and vandalism at this time?" I considered my options carefully in that moment of unusual clarity. Part of me desperately wanted to end this nightmare immediately, but something in Paulette's extremely desperate demeanor suggested she still had more tricks up her sequined sleeve. "Officers," I said diplomatically, "I'd prefer to resolve this matter peacefully if that's possible. Perhaps a strong warning would suffice for now." But Paulette interpreted my restraint as weakness, which was a critical miscalculation on her part. "You see?" she shrieked triumphantly. "He's afraid because he's guilty of something. If that car legally belongs to him, why wouldn't he press charges?" Then she made the statement that would become her ultimate downfall. "I know that car belongs to me because my ex-husband specifically told me he was putting the title in my name." Deputy Torres stopped and turned back with renewed interest. "Ma'am, a few minutes ago you claimed the car was a gift from your ex-husband. Now you're saying the title was transferred to you. Which version is actually true?" Paulette stumbled over her words, clearly realizing she'd contradicted herself, but instead of backing down, she sealed her fate completely. "You know what? I don't care what anyone says. That car belongs to me, and I demand those keys right now." An uncomfortable silence hung in the room like a heavy curtain that nobody wanted to pull back. 4 police officers, 1 lawyer, and myself all stared at Paulette like she'd just suggested we fly to Mars to resolve this property dispute. The sheer audacity of her proposal, demanding to take my Tesla for a test drive in front of law enforcement officers to prove her ownership, demonstrated a complete disconnect from reality that was both fascinating and terrifying to witness. The tension in the room was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Deputy Torres broke the silence with a carefully worded question. "Ma'am, are you suggesting that you should be allowed to operate a vehicle that you claim was stolen from you?" "Exactly," Paulette exclaimed, clapping her hands together with childlike enthusiasm that made her sequins sparkle wildly under the living room lights. A true owner would know all the intimate details, where every button is located, how the seats adjust, what personal preferences are stored in the memory. This man would be exposed immediately when I demonstrate my knowledge. Sergeant Williams stepped forward with the expression of someone who'd witnessed every possible brand of human foolishness during his law enforcement career and thought he'd seen it all until tonight. "Ma'am, that's not how ownership verification works in the real world. We use documentation and legal procedures, not driving tests administered by alleged owners." He nodded to Deputy Torres, who began moving toward Paulette with deliberate, measured steps. But Paulette was nowhere near finished with her increasingly bizarre performance. "Documentation can be faked," she shrieked, like someone who'd fallen too deep into conspiracy theories. "Only the true owner knows the secret details that can't be duplicated by criminals." She pulled yet another crumpled paper from her purse, a hand-drawn diagram of a Tesla interior that looked like something a kindergartner might create during art class. "Look at this evidence. I made a detailed diagram showing the exact layout of every button, the precise color of the stitching, even the location of that tiny scratch on the dashboard from where Charles hid it." Thornton leaned over to examine her diagram and had to suppress a chuckle that threatened to escape despite the serious nature of the situation. The drawing looked like an elementary school art project. Stick figure representations of seats, random circles labeled buttons in crayon, and an arrow pointing to an alleged scratch with a note scrawled beside it. Officer Bennett caught a glimpse of this masterpiece and had to bite his lip to avoid laughing outright at what was supposed to be serious evidence in a criminal investigation. Paulette's carefully constructed facade finally began to crack like old paint peeling off a weathered house. "That car belongs to me. I know it does because..." She trailed off suddenly, clearly realizing she was about to reveal something highly incriminating. "Because why, ma'am?" Deputy Torres prompted gently, sensing that we were approaching a critical moment. This was Paulette's fatal moment of truth, and instead of admitting defeat or seeking help, she made one final, desperate play. "Because I've been inside it," she shouted triumphantly, as if this admission was somehow proof of ownership rather than evidence of criminal behavior. "I know exactly how the seats feel when you sit in them, how the radio system works, where the spare charging cable is hidden in the trunk. You can't know those intimate details without being the rightful owner." Unfortunately for Paulette, this confession had just confirmed multiple breaking and entering charges. My camera footage already showed her numerous attempts to access the vehicle, and now she was essentially confessing to successful unauthorized entry. Officer Bennett immediately stepped forward with renewed interest. "Ma'am, are you stating under oath that you've been inside this vehicle without the owner's permission?" Realizing the enormous mistake she'd just made, Paulette attempted some frantic backtracking that only made things worse. "No, I mean, yes, but it's not breaking in when it's your own car. Charles gave me permission years ago when we were married." Deputy Torres had clearly reached the absolute limit of his professional patience. "Ma'am, even if this vehicle had belonged to your ex-husband at some point, which all our records clearly indicate it never did, permission from a previous owner wouldn't authorize access to current owner's property," he signaled to Officer Bennett, who began approaching with handcuffs ready. "Now wait just 1 minute," Paulette suddenly adopted the tone of an indignant citizen being wrongly accused by a corrupt system. "Are you actually going to arrest me for claiming my own property? This is America. I have constitutional rights." Sergeant Williams delivered the final verdict with absolute authority. "Ma'am, based on the evidence presented and the admissions you've made tonight, you're under arrest for harassment, filing false police reports, attempted theft, and criminal trespassing." "This is absolutely outrageous," she screamed as the handcuffs clicked into place with finality. "That car is mine. You can't arrest someone for trying to reclaim their own property." The neighbors who had gathered outside parted like the Red Sea to allow passage of this unprecedented spectacle. Paulette in handcuffs, still wearing her pineapple hat and sequin sweater, created a scene that would become neighborhood legend for years to come. Even as the squad car door closed behind her, she continued shouting through the window, "Check with Charles! Call my ex-husband! He'll tell you the truth!" Unfortunately for Paulette, the officers were already planning to do exactly that. 2 days after Paulette's dramatic arrest, the truth began emerging, like pieces of a puzzle clicking into place to reveal a picture far more disturbing than anyone had anticipated. Deputy Torres returned with an update that revealed the true extent of Paulette's delusion and the pattern of behavior that had been escalating for months. "We contacted ex-husband Charles Whitmore," he informed Thornton and me during a follow-up visit to tie up loose ends. "The gentleman was extremely cooperative and, frankly, completely unsurprised by Paulette's behavior." Charles, as it turned out, was indeed a wealthy attorney, but he had divorced Paulette after discovering a series of financial irregularities during their marriage that suggested deeper psychological issues than anyone had realized at the time. "He never owned a Tesla of any color," Torres explained with the methodical precision of someone reading from official reports. "It actually drives a conservative black Mercedes sedan and has comprehensive documentation to prove it. Furthermore, he's had a restraining order against Paulette dating back 18 months due to ongoing harassment and increasingly delusional claims about property ownership." The plot thickened considerably when the investigation revealed a disturbing pattern of similar behaviors dating back several years. "This isn't the first time she's claimed ownership of expensive vehicles," Officer Bennett added, consulting his notes. "We found police reports from 3 previous neighborhoods showing incidents involving a BMW, a Lexus, and even a neighbor's boat. It's always the same story. Her ex-husband supposedly bought the item for her as a gift, but somehow the legal ownership got confused during their divorce proceedings." The most revealing discovery came from the search warrant that had been executed on Paulette's residence following her arrest. Inside her house, investigators found what could only be described as a shrine-like collection of printed photographs of my Tesla, taken from various angles and distances over several months. Some photos had clearly been taken through the windows of my house while I was away. Others showed my vehicle in parking lots around town, grocery stores, and even at the Tesla service center where I'd had routine maintenance performed. A wall calendar was marked with cryptic notes tracking my daily routines with the dedication of a professional stalker. The court-ordered psychological evaluation concluded that she's suffering from severe delusional disorder combined with narcissistic personality traits that have been exacerbated by the stress of her divorce, Torres continued, his tone becoming more clinical. The psychiatric assessment recommended immediate professional treatment. Apparently, Paulette genuinely believed the elaborate stories she was creating. The divorce trauma, combined with sudden financial stress and the loss of the lifestyle she'd enjoyed, triggered a complete break from reality. The community response was swift and decisive once word of Paulette's arrest spread through the neighborhood grapevine. An emergency HOA meeting was called to remove her from her position as president, and Thornton helped document years of legitimate complaints against her from multiple residents that had been ignored or dismissed. The vote was unanimous, he reported with obvious satisfaction. The board also approved full reimbursement for your Tesla damages from the HOA emergency fund, since this was clearly an abuse of power by someone in an official position. The criminal charges against Paulette proved to be quite substantial when the district attorney's office finished reviewing all the evidence. She faced multiple felony counts: stalking, criminal harassment, filing false police reports, attempted theft, and breaking and entering. The district attorney was particularly interested in the false police report charges, Torres explained. Filing multiple false reports that waste public resources is considered a serious offense in this jurisdiction, especially when done repeatedly and systematically over several months. During the plea negotiations that followed, even more disturbing details emerged about Paulette's true financial situation and mental state. The divorce had left her in significant debt with minimal income, and her ex-husband had been paying substantial alimony just to keep her housed and fed. My Tesla represented everything she felt she'd lost: success, luxury, social status, and the respect of her peers. The psychiatrist described it as a form of symbolic ownership, Torres elaborated. In her mind, admitting that the car didn't belong to her would have meant admitting that her entire identity and self-worth had been false all along. In a surprising development, Charles Whitmore contacted me directly about a week after the arrest to personally apologize for his ex-wife's behavior and the trauma she'd inflicted on me and my property. I suspected she might eventually target someone with a Tesla, he said during our phone conversation. I tried to warn the police about her dangerous obsessions and provide them with background information, but legally there wasn't much more I could do until she actually committed crimes against a specific victim. He offered to cover the entire cost of my Tesla repairs and provide a character reference for any legal proceedings that might arise from the incident. More importantly, he gave me insight into Paulette's mental deterioration over the past few years, which helped me understand that her behavior wasn't personal. It was the manifestation of serious psychological issues that required professional intervention rather than simple punishment. The community healing process began almost immediately after Paulette's removal. Neighbors who had previously walked on eggshells around her began emerging with their own stories of harassment and intimidation that had gone unreported for fear of retaliation. Mrs. Patterson from the corner house revealed that Paulette had accused her of stealing garden gnomes and had filed multiple complaints about her suspicious nighttime activity. Mr. Kim from across the street had been reported for disturbing behavior that turned out to be him coming home from late shifts as an emergency room doctor. A new HOA president was elected within 2 weeks, a quiet, competent accountant named Rebecca Hoffman, who immediately implemented transparent procedures and accountability measures to prevent future abuses of power. No more unilateral decision-making, Thornton noted with obvious relief. Every major decision now requires a board vote and community input. We're actually going to function like a proper homeowners association instead of someone's personal fiefdom. Paulette eventually agreed to plead guilty to reduced charges in exchange for mandatory psychiatric treatment and full restitution for damages. She was sentenced to 18 months of supervised probation, 200 hours of community service, and was required to relocate outside of the county as part of the plea agreement. The judge was particularly disturbed by the premeditation aspect of her behavior, Torres explained during our final meeting. The camera evidence showed planned, systematic harassment over an extended period, which indicated she was fully aware of what she was doing rather than acting impulsively. 6 months later, Willowbrook Estates had been completely transformed by the shared experience of dealing with Paulette's reign of terror. A new sense of community had emerged from our collective ordeal, and neighbors who had barely spoken before began regularly gathering for coffee and conversation. My Tesla still sat in the same parking spot every evening, but now it represented something different. A symbol of standing up to bullies and the power of community solidarity in the face of individual madness. The experience had taught all of us valuable lessons about the importance of documentation, the need to support each other against harassment, and the fact that sometimes the most reasonable response to unreasonable behavior is to let the legal system do its job. 6 months after the dust had settled from Paulette's dramatic arrest and subsequent legal proceedings, I received an unexpected piece of mail that provided the final puzzle piece to understanding just how deep her problems had run. The letter came from Charles Whitmore's divorce attorney, containing details about Paulette's financial fraud during their marriage and a documented pattern of delusional behavior regarding property ownership that stretched back several years before she'd ever encountered my Tesla. According to the legal documents, Paulette had repeatedly claimed ownership of various items during the divorce proceedings, from jewelry she'd never purchased to furniture that had belonged to Charles's family for generations. The psychiatric evaluation ordered by the divorce court had revealed a complex web of narcissistic delusions and an inability to distinguish between things she wanted to own and things she actually owned. My Tesla had simply been the latest and most public manifestation of a long-standing mental health crisis. The community healing process that began with Paulette's removal continued to strengthen over the following months. Other neighbors came forward with their own stories of harassment and intimidation that painted a picture of someone who had been systematically abusing her HOA position for years. The new HOA board, led by Rebecca Hoffman, conducted a thorough audit of Paulette's tenure and discovered multiple violations of proper procedures, misuse of community funds, and patterns of retaliation against residents who had dared to question her authority. An emergency community meeting was held to address these findings and establish new safeguards to prevent future abuses of power. The attendance was remarkable. Nearly every household in Willowbrook Estates was represented, including several families who had moved away during Paulette's reign, specifically to escape her harassment. The stories shared that evening revealed the true extent of the toxic environment she had created through years of unchecked power and increasingly erratic behavior. The legal resolution of Paulette's case proved to be quite comprehensive when all was said and done. Beyond the criminal charges, she faced several civil lawsuits from neighbors whose property she had damaged and whose lives she had disrupted through her systematic campaign of harassment. The total financial penalties, including restitution, legal fees, and damages, essentially wiped out whatever assets she had remaining after her expensive divorce proceedings. More importantly, from a community perspective, the criminal charges sent a clear message that this type of behavior would not be tolerated. The local police department used Paulette's case as a training example for officers on how to handle harassment complaints and the importance of taking documentation seriously. Deputy Torres later told me that the comprehensive evidence we had provided made their job much easier and ensured that justice could be served effectively. The transformation of our neighborhood culture was perhaps the most positive outcome of this entire ordeal. Where once people had lived in fear of arbitrary complaints and retaliation, now there was open communication and mutual support. The new HOA board implemented regular community social events, transparent decision-making processes, and clear appeals procedures for any disputes that might arise. The difference was like night and day compared to Paulette's autocratic approach. My Tesla, which had been the catalyst for this entire drama, became something of a neighborhood celebrity in its own right. Children would point it out to visiting relatives as the car that got the mean lady arrested, and neighbors often stopped to admire its pristine condition, now fully restored thanks to the insurance settlement and community support. Sometimes I would catch people taking pictures with it, and I didn't mind at all. It had become a symbol of justice prevailing over petty tyranny. The final twist in Paulette's story came in the form of a handwritten letter I received about a year after her arrest. It had been sent from a residential treatment facility where she was receiving intensive psychiatric care as part of her plea agreement. The letter was brief, but seemed genuine in its acknowledgement that her behavior had been wrong, an expression of remorse for the damage she had caused. I realized now that the car never belonged to me, she wrote, in careful, deliberate handwriting that looked nothing like the frantic scrawl of her threatening notes. I'm working with doctors to understand why I needed to believe it did, and why I couldn't accept reality when it was right in front of me. Thank you for not pressing for the maximum charges against me. I hope that someday I can make proper amends for what I put you and our community through." Reading that letter, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Relief that she was getting help, sadness for the mental anguish she must have been experiencing, and hope that her treatment would be successful. Mental illness doesn't excuse harmful behavior, but understanding the underlying causes can help prevent similar situations in the future. I decided to keep the letter as a reminder that even the most frustrating human conflicts usually have deeper roots than what appears on the surface. The experience taught me valuable lessons about the importance of standing up to bullies, while also trying to understand the human factors that create such behavior in the first place. It reinforced my belief in the power of community solidarity and the absolute necessity of proper documentation when dealing with harassment. Most importantly, it showed me that sometimes the best response to unreasonable behavior is patient persistence combined with faith in our legal institutions. Today, as I sit in my living room looking out at my pristine Tesla sparkling in the afternoon sun, I'm grateful for the reminder that most people, when faced with truth and consequences, are capable of growth and change. The cameras are still running, old habits die hard, but the neighborhood feels safe and welcoming in a way it never did during Paulette's reign of terror. And while I'll always remember the drama of the HOA Karen who claimed my Tesla was hers, I'm more grateful for the community of genuine neighbors who emerged from that chaos. Sometimes it takes a crisis to show people what really matters, and in this case, what mattered was supporting each other against someone who had forgotten that power should serve the community, not the other way around. If you've got your own HOA horror story, I'd love to hear about it in the comments, because if this experience taught me anything, it's that we're definitely not alone in dealing with people who think authority means never having to say you're wrong.
Another wild tale courtesy of QA Stories. If your jaw's on the floor, you're in the right place. Subscribe and stay shocked.